So the gross anatomy, when you look at the inside of it, you can see you have these really large, obvious circular folds. These are permanent transverse folds that are in the intestinal lining. This is not like rugae, where it was a temporary thing in the stomach where when you expanded it, they were going to flatten out. No, these circular folds are going to be permanent. And again, they're going to increase the surface area. More surface area means more secretion, more digestion, more absorption, and more efficiency for all of those. So looking close up, we have within those circular folds, if you look at a section of it, those same layers we saw earlier with the mucosa, submucosa, muscle layer, and serosa. So that mucosa is going to have those circular folds, and then on top of it, it's going to have these villi. So the villi are also going to increase our surface area. When you look specifically within a villus, the villus is going to have a capillary network where you're able to absorb the nutrients into those capillaries to get into your bloodstream. It will also have a specialized lymphatic vessel that we refer to as a lacteal. The lacteal is going to help us to absorb your fats and fatty acids. The lacteals are going to allow us to absorb lipids that are coming through and getting digested with the help of our bile salts and our lipases. Notice the comparison from the small intestine to the stomach with our muscular layer. So with our small intestine, we're back to 2 layers of muscular tissue instead of the 3 that we had with the stomach. So the stomach had that oblique layer. We're just looking at the circular and the longitudinal layer. And again, those are going to allow us to do peristalsis, which were those rhythmic waves that are going to be squeezing that food product through the digestive tract. Now here's a recap of the hormones that we talked about with the stomach, and now we're going to relate them also to our small intestine. So remember, food came into the stomach. That food in the stomach was going to trigger our G cells within our stomach to produce gastrin. That gastrin was going to cause us to produce acid within the parietal cells, and then it was also going to start our mixing waves and making the intensity of that mixing and churning to increase. When that food starts moving now into the small intestine, specifically within the duodenum is also going to have G cells. So the G cells are going to be secreting gastrin when incompletely digested proteins enter that area. So you had some protein digestion happening within the stomach, and if they don't finish getting digested, they're going to go into that duodenum, and then we're going to notice that those are still there, and that's going to activate our gastrin again. When the chyme enters into the duodenum, you're also going to start making secretin. So that secretin is going to cause the secretions by the pancreas to increase, because remember, the pancreas is creating all of those digestive enzymes for any kind of food product. It's going to also stimulate the release of bile into the duodenum from the gallbladder, and it's going to reduce gastric motility and secretion rates. So at that point, you should have fewer things happening within the stomach, so it's going to start inhibiting that. Along with that secretin, CCK is also going to be stimulated by that chyme. The CCK is also going to stimulate the pancreas to release things. It is also going to be the one responsible for relaxing that sphincter that's going to allow us to eject bile and pancreatic juice that will then be released into the duodenum. CCK also inhibits gastric activity, and it starts to inhibit hunger as well once you have that, because you already have food, which means you're going to have nutrients that are going to be absorbed from them. The duodenum is also going to produce GIP, which is an inhibitory peptide. GIP is gastric inhibitory peptide. So gastric means it's inhibiting the stomach, because what it does is it inhibits the gastrin, and the gastrin in the stomach was then causing all this stimulation of the things in the stomach, because at that point the food product is now going into our small intestine, so we need less activity within the stomach, more within our duodenum. The final hormone that we're looking at is VIP. VIP is vasoactive intestinal peptide. Vasoactive meaning the vascular system, meaning we are going to dilate our blood vessels. So that's going to be our intestinal capillaries. We're going to dilate those so that we're ready to pull in the nutrients that we have just broken down from the food within the duodenum. It's also going to inhibit acid production within the stomach, because again, we're slowing down what's happening in the stomach, and most of the activity is going to be happening within the small intestine itself. So the end result of all of these hormones is you're going to facilitate nutrient absorption into the bloodstream or into your lacteals. So all those monomers that you just broke down now are getting absorbed across that intestinal wall, And it's also going to facilitate you actually using the nutrients by your tissues, because one of the things that's going to cause you to use that nutrient that you absorbed is going to be insulin released from your pancreas, which is going to help regulate your blood sugar levels, because that insulin is actually going to be stimulated by GIP. So all of these are going to be interconnected, and the whole goal is to take the nutrients that are out of your food that you've already broken down, absorb it, and then use it. All right, now we're finally moving on into the large intestine. The large intestine kind of makes a framework around the small intestine. So we've removed the small intestines from this diagram here. So that was that squiggly mass that was all here in the center. And now we're looking specifically at our large intestine. So here's the ileum of our small intestine, and it's going to come together at the large intestine into this first portion of the large intestine that we refer to as the cecum. Notice the cecum has this finger-like projection that's out here, which is referred to as the appendix. There is a valve which is going to be the connecting point between the ileum and the cecum. We refer to it as the ileocecal valve. This is to ensure that we don't have waste products from the large intestine going backwards into the small intestine. So we should have a one-way flow of chyme from the small intestine to get deposited into the large intestine, and then the ileocecal valve will close off to make sure it doesn't go backwards. Now at this point, that chyme has released all of its good nutrients that we wanted during the small intestine section, and we're left with pretty much a watery waste. And at this point, the function of the large intestine is that you're mostly going to be absorbing water. So it's there for water absorption, to take the water that was already in your system and reuse it for the rest of your body. Less than 10% of the nutrients that you are intaking in your food are going to be absorbed in here. So there is a tiny bit of nutrient absorption that's going to be happening. We also want to reabsorb those bile salts, organic waste, and vitamins that are all still left over in there. So the purpose of the large intestine is to take that last bit of water out with those other substances I just talked about, and we compact that waste product, and we're going to form feces from it. That large waste product first we refer to as bulk. So we have chyme made in the stomach, which goes into the small intestine. That is going to then be called bulk when we're moved into the large intestine. And then as you reabsorb the water out of the bulk, you are going to be left with feces. So if we notice with our large intestine, we have that cecum that we talked about, and then we're going to have a series of colons. We have the ascending colon going upward, taking that bulk upward. Then it goes through the transverse colon, then down through the descending colon, and then at the end you kind of wrap back around with the sigmoid colon, and then you get to the rectum, and then the hole at the end is going to be the anus. When you're looking at absorbing the water as you are going through, you can see though that the anus is open to the outside environment. And because it is open to the outside of environment, the bacteria in the environment are able to grow on your skin and then grow upward through the rectum, and then they're going to colonize your large intestine. That is okay. This is part of our microbiome, or our gut bacteria that we're looking at. That gut bacteria is helpful to us because they live inside our large intestine, and they help to break down nutrients that we otherwise could not do on our own. So things that were not absorbed by the small intestine, the bacteria are able to break down and use. They're also able to produce some vitamins that you are going to then absorb and use. So the bacteria in your large intestine also produce vitamin K and biotin. So those are going to be things that are going to help with our metabolism, and we do absorb them into the blood capillaries. And if you recall back from the cardiovascular system, the bacteria are also going to be responsible for breaking down bilirubin that was going to be a waste product from your red blood cells' hemoglobin. So you have that bilirubin that's going to be broken down, and that stercobilins are going to be the yellow-brown pigments that are going to be deposited into the feces, giving it that color. The urobilins are going to be transported through your bloodstream to be processed by your kidneys, and that yellow pigment is going to give urine its yellow color. As the bacteria are feeding on indigestible carbohydrates to us, they're also going to produce byproducts with their cellular respiration, so it's going to produce gas. It's going to produce hydrogen sulfide. So all that gas that you're expelling when people have to flatulate, that is going to be because of the bacteria that are digesting the indigestible foods to you. They're using it as their food, but as a waste product, they're releasing gases that also need to have a way to release. So they have to exit your body as well. Now recall we were going to be doing peristalsis to move through the digestive tract. Your large intestine is going to be doing the same thing, but we have a very slow movement from the cecum as it's going to be moving to the transverse colon. We want that waste, that bulk material to sit in there for a period of time so that you are going to allow hours of water absorption. So you're just going to be reabsorbing the water that was coming through it. So we're going to have those peristaltic waves that will eventually start moving things through the cecum to the transverse colon. We're also going to have that segmentation movement. So each of these little pockets that you see on the large intestine, these are referred to as haustra. So the haustra are going to exhibit this segmentation where it's churning and mixing the contents, and then from there it's able to absorb the water by mixing more of it, so you have more of the water coming in contact with the mucosa layer of the large intestine. Once you get to the transverse colon, you're going to have powerful peristaltic contractions, which are referred to as mass movements. So you have a much faster movement of that feces as it's passing through, still absorbing water at that point. So as you start moving those through the different parts of your colon, once you start getting down here to the rectum, that rectum is going to have pressure sensors in there, so it will notice when things are going to start filling it. So stretch receptors in the rectum are going to trigger a defecation reflex. So that's our involuntary response to the rectum being filled that's going to trigger what we feel as what we need, a bowel movement. Notice there are two sets of sphincter muscles. Remember, sphincter muscle is just going to be that circular ring around an area. So we have an internal anal sphincter, and then we will have an external anal sphincter. This external anal sphincter is going to be skeletal muscles. So you have control over this one as to whether you're squeezing it shut or not. The internal anal sphincter, though, is going to be reflexive and an involuntary muscle. Now, if you remember back to the nervous system, when we talked about our peripheral nerves that were innervating the different organs in our body, the autonomic nervous system was the one that's innervating all of our different organs. The autonomic could be divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic. Remember, sympathetic is your fight or flight. We called your parasympathetic your rest and digest. So signals from the parasympathetic nervous system are going to cause us to trigger the movements of the peristalsis to move that feces through the different parts of the colon. In times of stress, the sympathetic is going to take over. And when the sympathetic takes over, you're not going to have that movement through the colons like you would with the parasympathetic. This gives a nice overview of how much that you are going to be taking in through your dietary input, and then how many secretions are actually made by your digestive organs, and then what you're going to do with the water and how you're reabsorbing it. So if you were to take in 2,200 milliliters of food and drink, and it were to go through this pathway, you can see that in terms of digestive secretions, your saliva, you're making 1,500 milliliters of saliva per day. So that's going to be included with your food as it brought down. Gastric secretions, your stomach is going to make 1,500 milliliters of gastric juice. Then from there we move from the stomach into the small intestine. Notice our liver and pancreas are going to be creating these secretions as well. Your intestines are creating secretions. So we continually add all these different secretions from your digestive organs. As we're going through the intestine is going to be secreting a good amount of that intestinal juice in there, but as it's passing through, you're also going to be reabsorbing a lot of that. So notice for your small intestine, you're reabsorbing 8,000 milliliters of that gastric juice right back into our bloodstream for the water reabsorption we have. The large intestine with the colons is going to be 1,250 milliliters. So you're reabsorbing as much water as you can to recycle it and have efficient use of water within your body. Notice as you're going through, we were dehydrating everything, you're going to lose about 150 milliliters within the feces. A lot of feces is actually just dead bacteria, which is part of your microbiome, plus the indigestible products, plus a little bit of the fluid that's left over from the secretions/ food and water that you were going to ingest. Now our getting old sucks slide. So as you are aging, these are different things that are happening. In your mouth, you're decreasing that amount of saliva. Your esophagus has slower motility. Your stomach, decreased acid, making it harder to digest your food. Slower rate of gastric emptying as it's going into the small intestine. Small intestine has altered absorption of the nutrients. increased risk of gastrointestinal diseases. Your large intestine, your microbiome is going to change over time. You're going to have increased risk of diverticulitis, which is going to be pouches that are going to get infected and inflamed within your large intestine. Also increased risk of colon cancer, because as your cells get older, those checkpoints are not going to be working as well, and so you'll get cells that are going to divide uncontrollably. Your accessory organs are all going to decrease in the production of whatever they need, so you're not going to have as effective digesting and absorption overall. And then here's our integration of the digestive system with all the other systems in the body that we've already covered. So you can see all the different systems that we've had and how they are going to be linked to the digestive system and how they're going to assist the digestive system. And then you're going to see how the digestive system is then going to provide things for the other systems in the body. That is the end of our digestive system.